the most feared man in the world, the man who built an empire that stretched from the Pacific to Poland, the man who had an estimated 40 million people killed, was also a lover of women. But if you were one of his wives, you were in for a terrifying experience. Hi, I'm your host, and today we bring you another interesting video about the scariest men you wouldn't want to mess with. Let's get into it. No. 1. He wasn't faithful. When you have 1,000 women in your harem, faithfulness becomes an alien concept. You heard that right. The great Genghis Khan had at least 1,000 women in his harem, although some sources say it was closer to 500. It didn't matter if he was married or not, though. If he saw a pretty face, he just had to have her by any means necessary. In fact, there was nothing his wives could do about it. They knew their place, and they couldn't disobey him. One wife even wrote a letter to her husband after she caught him with another woman in her own chambers. She said that she knew he would never be faithful and that she was just one of many. Yet she still felt the need to express her disappointment. How stupid of her. You don't complain to your master. Not only would this earn you a stern talking to, but it might cost you your life. Number 2, marrying young. To marry or not to marry was not a question for Genghis Khan's daughters. When they reached the age of 12, they were deemed marriageable, and their fathers arranged marriages for them. Most of them were married off to strengthen alliances between clans, and their husbands were usually older men. For example, his eldest daughter, Alaku, was married to the famous Mongol warrior Batu, who was 70 years older than her. That's disgusting. Imagine being married to your grandpa. What's worse is that these marriages were not always consummated. Until the girl came of age, the bride would live in her parents' home, and the groom would do the same with his parents. Once the girl reached the appropriate age, then the marriage would be consummated. What a sick custom. Number 3, stolen brides. Kidnapping brides was a common practice among Mongols, and Genghis Khan was no exception. In fact, he was known to have stolen several women during his conquests. For example, he met a beautiful woman named Bort, and when he learned that she was taken, he assembled a team of 100 men to raid the village where she lived. After taking her by force, he married her against her will. So you can imagine how bad things were for the poor woman. But she eventually gave birth to one of his sons, so perhaps things turned out for the best, perhaps. Number 4, death of a concubine. In one of Genghis Khan's personal stories, a concubine was put to death for merely glancing at another man. Yes, you heard that correctly. Just a look. According to Rashid al-Din, a Persian historian, the story goes like this. One day, the concubine looked at a handsome young man at the Khan's court, and a eunuch reported her for improper conduct. The Khan became enraged and ordered her to be put to death. The poor woman was only given 2 options. Either she could end her own life, or the Khan would make her death slow and painful. She chose the latter, and the Khan had her sewn up in a leather sack along with a rock, a dog, and a ram. Then he tossed the sack into a lake, leaving her to die. Well, that was an unusual way to go. No, 5, love potion. History has shown that love potions are nothing but a fairy tale. However, this didn't stop Genghis Khan from trying his luck. During his conquest of Western Xia, he heard rumors about a magical drink that could make any woman fall in love with its consumer. Although it was likely nothing more than a local aphrodisiac, he decided to give it a try, and who could blame him? Perhaps he was just curious. Unfortunately, he found out the hard way that magic potions aren't real, because not only did the drink not make women fall in love with him, it made them violently ill. Well, maybe stick to traditional methods next time. 6, his last wife. Genghis Khan's last wife was a 17-year-old girl from China named Wan. The marriage was an attempt to forge an alliance between the Mongols and the Western Xie, and it seemed to be a good one too, since the girl was a princess. However, it was a bit awkward. Genghis Khan was already 60 years old when he married her, which meant that there was a 43-year difference between them. Talk about a cougar. Although we don't know much about her life, we do know that she bore him a son when she was just 19. Then she died shortly after giving birth, probably from complications. Number 7, arranged marriages. Arranging marriages for his children was a big deal for Genghis Khan. For example, he married his son to the daughter of a powerful Chinese military leader in order to cement an alliance. However, he didn't stop there. He also had his daughter married to one of his generals, presumably to keep him happy. And what did the general do after marrying his boss's daughter? He immediately went to war and got himself killed. Well, that was an unfortunate turn of events. No, 8 too many wives. Imagine trying to cook dinner for 1,000 women every night. It would take an army of chefs. Well, that's exactly what Genghis Khan had to deal with every night. Since he had at least 1,000 wives, he needed a massive kitchen staff to feed all of them. This was especially difficult during wartime when food was scarce. Sometimes he would go days without eating so that his army wouldn't have to ration their food. Now that's dedication. Number 9, no privacy. Privacy was non-existent in Genghis Khan's life. He lived in a massive yurt with his wives and concubines, and there was no such thing as personal space. To make matters worse, his wives weren't the only ones sharing his bed. In fact, there were often guests too. For example, when Kublai met the Persian poet Nizami, he invited him to sleep in his bed. Can you imagine the look on the poet's face when he was asked to share the bed with the most feared man in the world? 10, secret keeper. When you're married to a man like Genghis Khan, you learn quickly that you can't trust anyone. Even his wives were wary of each other, and they would often spy on one another. For example, one wife accused another of putting poison in the Khan's food. And to protect herself, she spent a whole year pretending to be sick. What a lucky guess. It wasn't long before the Khan noticed her ruse and he banished her from his life. Number 11, horseplay. Believe it or not, Genghis Khan loved horses almost as much as he loved women. In fact, he was known to have a great sense of humor when it came to playing with horses. For example, he once unleashed a horse into the audience at a wrestling match, and the crowd panicked. Another time, he surprised a group of Mongol nobles by riding a horse into their banquet. He must have been quite the sight to behold. No, 12, a broken nose. Genghis Khan may have been the most feared man in the world, but he was also very human. He had emotions and he could feel pain. In fact, he once broke his nose while wrestling. That's right. The mighty Khan was defeated by his opponent, and he had to retreat with a bloody nose. Ouch. Number 13, children everywhere. You would think that having 1,000 wives would be enough for a man, but Genghis Khan obviously didn't think so. He had at least 4 sons and dozens of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. In fact, there are over 100 million descendants of Genghis Khan alive today. Talk about a legacy. Number 14, jealousy. We've all seen what happens when you get between a man and his woman. But what happens when you get between Genghis Khan and his women? Well, let's just say it's not pretty. Once when he was in hot springs with his wives, a nearby lord took a peek, and one of the wives pointed him out. The Khan became furious and ordered him boiled alive. So remember, stay away from the royal hot tubs. 15, the royal pig assassination. One time, Genghis Khan was visiting a village, and he noticed that everyone was staring at his pigs. Apparently, they were huge and fat, and the villagers had never seen anything like them. One of the villagers couldn't resist the urge to steal one of his pigs, but he was caught red-handed. As punishment, Genghis Khan ordered him to be wrapped in felt and left to die of starvation. Talk about a harsh punishment. There you have it, folks. What do you think of the scary things Genghis Khan did to his wives? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more interesting videos. Thanks for watching.